Hello and welcome to World Talks. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. With the negotiations underway, Donald Trump's administration seems to have adopted a twofold approach to Moscow. American investors seek to profit from Russia as Trump pursues rapprochement. But on a shorter run, the US has increased sanctions pressure on Russia by banning foreign companies from making payments in Russian energy resources. Is this just a negotiating tactic aimed at persuading Russia to agree to a ceasefire? Or perhaps it be just another real hard stick on Putin? To discuss this new paradigm on the updated American strategy on Russia and the appetites of the stock exchange as well, we are joined now by Paweł Wojciechowski, the Polish finance minister, former Polish finance minister. Good evening. And
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
But also, former deputy foreign minister.
Exactly.
Well.
Great.
Yes.
Very good. So I wasn't very much mistaken.
Okay, yes.
Thank you so much for this precise addition. And so let's start with a probable negative factor for Ukraine and its allies. That is the lifting of sanctions, which are still somewhere in the air as the negotiations are underway. As reported by Financial Times, hedge funds and brokers eye the country's corporate bonds and the ruble to wage that Donald Trump's rapprochement with Putin will send a wave of capital back to Russia's economy. So what's the likelihood of the return back to business as usual?
Well, rapprochement means that maybe the appetite from some of the investors are growing, but I'm pretty sure that they have cold feet because it's not that easy. Because if you look at the sanctions, the European Union adopted a 16 package of sanctions. The US, we have just mentioned, another sanction. So, unless you lift all of those sanctions, in a symmetrical way, that would be very difficult to do business with Russia. And I think, of course, the hedge funds are a specific type of institutional investors, which can, for example, trade in those different derivatives. For example, derivatives are special instruments which don't have to be delivered. So you're going about, for example, this type of non-deliverable forward on a Russian ruble. That's one of those derivatives which have been traded, which shows the signs that there's of interest of ruble appreciation. Why? The ruble appreciates because the assets, Russian assets, are frozen. Maybe there would be lifted sanctions on trading of Russian treasury securities, because now banned. So the question is, you have a praxis, for example, trading on those special instruments, maybe even trading on some allies of some countries which are close to Russia, like Kazakhstan, the Kazakh tenge. It's another type of instruments being traded, but doesn't mean that there's a major breakthrough happening yet, because those trades are, in comparison to what was traded in the past, was like 100 to 200 of the trades on treasury securities of the Russian government in the past.
All right. Generally speaking, ruble appreciates in hope for the end of the war, right? Of the
Yeah.
war.
Because it's the assets in Russia are depressed altogether, including there's relatively good returns you can get on buying Russian treasuries, which are not allowed to do so right now.
Exactly, right now. But maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's hope for rollback of sanctions simply.
Perhaps, but it depends on, this unpredictable nature of President Trump, that he's talking about, Arctica, he's talking about some of the people from his administration talk about reset of operations with Russia, maybe. Some people talk about reverse Nixon or reverse Kissinger, rapprochement with Russia, so the Russia does not to be over-dependent on China. Please remember that after the war, Russia, is sending much more energy, oil and gas to China and to India, for example. and other, products as well to the global south, in return as well for the goods which are coming mainly from China. So in fact, it's now much more dependent on China than, for example, is quite not dependent on the European Union or the United States.
Could you please explain us very generally how does the whole Russian market functions right now after the sanctions have been imposed in 2022?
Well, it's kind of swift, so the banking sector is pretty much what you call sometimes financial repression. So it's a type of autarky, in the sense of financial streams and flows, except, for those countries they can trade, for example, China, as mentioned. But on the other side, this whole industry is being reversed from typical industry to the industry which is, military or war industry, You have seen for example, in the periods even before the Second World War, have seen the growth of the economy based on the internal stimulus coming from the government. That happened before the war, 5 years before 1939. You have seen the German industry, the German GDP grow by almost 10% per year because of the heavy armaments, So they turn the stimulus, the kind of the funds that were coming from investment from abroad through capital flows into the stimulus, the fiscal stimulus into its own industry. And they had reserves. The reserves are not that big anymore. They're shrinking. So there is a hope that maybe Russians are under pressure now to negotiate.
Right. So, of course, there's a dynamic between stock exchange, trade, and politics, and the whole peace process. So what if Moscow rejects the ceasefire right now? How will that affect the trade and Russian investors' situation?
Well, that's going to be a still volatile time because the tactics, I understand, negotiating tactics of President Trump is to push here and there, and sometimes see what are the response of the players, But definitely, there is a type of kind of you're talking about transactional type of nature of the administration. They say let's have a deal, okay? So, for example, in comparison to the type of things that were played before the Trump came to office, there was a play of the atrocities, the moral issues. Now there's all about, kind of business transaction type of views, So that changed the dynamics, Even Zelensky went to Washington, you remember the Friday,
Yes.
Everybody in the Oval Office, everybody remembered that he showed the pictures to President Trump of atrocities, But that doesn't play anymore, And Trump is saying, well, and he's saying to to Americans, look, I'm to make the deals for you to have some benefits. So this is a type of different game, It's unusual, it's completely unpredictable, and to see what happens. But the volatility is there in the ruble as well.
And shortly, just as we're running out of time. What is the need of the Russian market right now and the Russian finance also ministry to get the money from the market abroad?
Well, Russia is running the large deficits, is having high inflation and very high interest rates. But it can, it's a type of autarky word, which doesn't. It's relying on on other, friendshoring with autocratic countries, such as China,
BRICS,
and of course can survive. Okay, but the most important is how much money we'll have to still to spend on military, on defense, not on defense, but on aggression, and that's a key factor. I mean, because it has been it accumulated big reserves because of the surpluses because of selling oil and gas in the past and current account surplus in the past. And now it has a situation in which those reserves are shrinking very much, and there is an issue of frozen assets as well. So the question is how much money will it get to continue the war, and whether in the future we'll be able to move and change from the war economy into the normal economy. I'm not so optimistic about that. That might be very difficult, so the investors should be very worried about that, because being at the mercy of Putin and investing in this country would be very difficult.
But this is a distant perspective.
Yes,
and
very
it's
much
not
so.
our problem, for
Yes,
sure.
very much so.
Thank you very much, Paweł Wojciechowski, former Polish finance minister and deputy foreign minister as well. Thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for
much.
being with us.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for watching this episode of World Talks. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more.